Hi, in this video we are going to discuss about ngFor loop. In previous video we already described how to conditionally render elements. Let's take an example to display list of element using ngFor structure directive. So ngFor directive is pretty much similar to for loop in any other programming language. The only difference here, we are rendering the list of element in HTML instead of executing some logic. So here comes the syntax. Star here represent that is the structured directive which will going to change the property of DOM, and ngFor is the syntax for same. So let's move towards our Typescript file. Here I am describing as languages array. So here I am describing as array which consists as JavaScript, and I'm also putting TypeScript over here. So TypeScript over here, and also I'm putting as say whatever you want to put. Say I'm putting that Angular and C sharp also. Let me save this thing out and move toward the HTML. So here I'm using that ngFor loop to demonstrate how this thing will work. So I'm using the div, which is the container for all this tag over here. So and here I'm using that syntax ngFor, and also I'm using that let say whatever the variable you want to define. So I'm defining as lang. It will iterate of this thing off, and it will iterate through an array of languages. So let me copy this thing and paste it down over here, and also with the help of interpolation I am printing this thing over here as say lang. Let me save this thing out, and if you move to the browser you can see all this thing will be iterated. And let me put it as h3 tag, or say for your clear vision. So and also not closing it over here, and I'm using that backspace s3. Save this and move to the browser. You can see this thing, and let me click on inspect and will show you. As you can see that this thing will be iterated multiple times with the conditions, so you can use whatever you want to use. See over here that div is different for all these conditions, and you can also check that index over here as 0 1 2. If you want to check the index, we have another special keywords which is only going to use for ngFor directive. So let me put it as semicolon and then use index as I over here. Let me save this thing out, and also printing this thing with using interpolation as I. Save this thing out, go to the browser. You can see index over here after refreshing as 0. Why 0 is coming? Because array index always start with 0, so that's why we have that index starting from 0. We also have 4 inbuilt keyword for ngFor directive, which is first, last, odd or even. So let's take an example for all of these. So here I'm describing as a first and putting as a f, and also putting it as a f over here. Save this and move to the browser. You can see it will return true only on the first value of the array, and other it will return false over here in this manner. And also if you want to check whether the particular element is last in the array, you can use L over here. So it will return that last value as true and all this value as false, as you can see in the browser. And we can also check the same case scenario for particularly odd and even also. So I'm putting odd as O and pasting on this thing. Save this out, move to the browser. You can see over here it will return odd to true and even to false. As you can see, it will return that 0 to false and 1 to true, which is odd, and 2 to false and 3 to true over here. We can also check even in such case scenario. So we have even as E and as E over here. Let me save this thing out and move to the browser. As you can see, it will return 0 and that second index is true. And even or as is a keyword, but you can define whatever you want to define. Say I'm defining as x over here and simply describing as x over here. It will work see, so it's user defined, but here my suggestion is you can use the first value of the keyword. For example, if I choose first over here, so I'm describing as first as F, and if I choosing E over here, so that I'm using even as E. So that's the standard code practice you can follow. And also we can describe this thing. So let me create a very simple project to demonstrate how we can use that ngFor loop with the dynamic creation of an array. So let me commenting this thing and moving towards the Typescript file. I am also commenting all this thing as of no use. I am erasing, and here I am defining the temporary variable as say temp and language over here. So I'm using temp lang as say string, and I'm using that is function of Typescript to define it as a string. And I'm also using two function, so which is user defined function on update lang over here, and say add lang, which is a simple form of language. So I'm describing it as a array function. So now this thing, and both the function are blank, and let me show you what is in the UI. In the UI nothing is there because we have commented out the whole code. So let me put it as label over here. So label I'm putting as a say languages and save this thing out, and you can see the label over here. Okay, let me add that input text over here. So input, which is of say type, say I want text over here, and also let me put in this thing and save this thing out over here. As you can see, so the text box is created, but here we are simply using that bootstrap css. So I'm using the class for bootstrap css. I'm using that class, and then which is form control over here. Save this thing out, move to the browser. As you can see that css bootstrap class is applied, and also so I'm using that event binding on the basis of input. It will call the method on update lang. Let me copy this out and paste this thing over here. And as this is a method, so we have opening and closing circular brackets. Let me save this thing out and move toward the browser. As you can see over here, nothing is there, but we also want a button. So let me create a button over here. So button, and give this as add language. Let me save this thing out and move to the browser. As you can see, I'm also adding that bootstrap class for this button. So I'm creating as class of say button, and then button slash primary. Save this thing out, move toward the browser. You can see add button is there, but firstly let me show you we haven't added this thing. So here I'm using that dollar event symbol. As you can see, let me save this thing out, and we also like using that event, and also I'm logging this on the console using console.log inbuilt function of the JavaScript, and putting that event over here as say event. Let me save this thing out and move toward the browser. As you can see in the console, if I write something, that will print in the console. But say hey, I want this thing but not in this format, I want only data. So here I'm manipulating this thing as say I'm using this thing as say HTML input element over here. So HTML, I'm putting input element over here, and also closing this thing, and in the input element I want event, and then target over here, and then I want the value for same. So value, let me save this thing out and move to the browser. You can see over here, if I write h, it will come, and whatever I write, it will come. So let me describe this thing as say I'm putting that value of this into this dot temp language, and assigning the value to this. Let me save this thing out and paste it on this thing, and also consoling this thing onto the console. So I'm putting as say temp value, and also using this dot temp language. So let me save this thing out and move to the browser and just hit refresh, and you can see over here whatever I write, it will print this thing. And also this thing is stored in the temporary string. So here we can also put on click of this function, I'm calling this add language. So on click of this button, I'm calling add language. So move toward the HTML, and on the click on this, again we are using that event binding, paste it down, putting the method, save this thing out, and printing the console over here. So console.log, I'm just printing the simple value just to check whether our simple application is working. So this dot temp language over here, save this thing out and move toward the browser. So I'm writing that hurry over here, but if I hit this, that will print the value of temp language. See, it's working fine. So here we are using that inbuilt method of the JavaScript. So I'm using this thing as this dot languages dot push, which is the inbuilt function for an array, and I'm the value of this dot temp language. Let me save this thing out and check whether this thing is working fine. So I'm putting as hurry add, okay, this thing is working. And also I'm putting that console dot log over here and putting that value as we have updated language, and putting this as printing the whole array. Let me save this thing out and put it in the browser. You can write as say type over here and add language, okay, it will add, and say I write something that add, okay, it's adding. So now we have to print this thing using our ngFor loop. So here I'm using that ngFor loop for div over here, and as you can see inside the div we are using star ngFor syntax for same, and that advanced let for each loop, or simply you can say for of loop. So let we have lang over here of languages, and also printing this thing within the h3 thread. So I'm describing as h3 with the help of interpolation. I'm putting this thing as lang, and just go to the browser, and you can see over here if I write something as java and hit add, you can see that java is updated. So right now we don't need this thing to print on console anymore. We have that our application is working fine. So move toward the browser, and you can see that dynamic creation of array is possible, and also we are simply just printing using that for loop in Angular. So here I am simply putting as java and adding this thing over here. So if I click on add language, it will add, and we can also put C# over here. We can also put Angular. See over here on click of add language, it will work. If I hit that Angular, it will add. See, if I hit enter, it will hit and show that Angular is present. So in this video we have discussed about ng for loop in detail. So thanks for watching this video. We'll see you in the next video.